Does stuff start when I start speaking?
Whenever you go.
In the film New Jack City, we follow the story of Nino Brown and how he industrialized the crack cocaine epidemic. We can see through this movie that Nino Brown displays a couple lessons that need to be learned that America can learn today. Is that when there's demand for something and a high need for something, we should capitalize on that. And I thought of this specifically when I was coming up with my topic on what to speak about. Today, I'm going to speak on behalf of not marijuana legalization, but rather the industrialization and the profits America can make off of cannabis legalization. We will be able to analyze this through 3 key points of analysis. First, we will be able to analyze this through the war on drugs and the money we've spent so far on it. Secondly, we will be able to analyze this through the mass incarceration that we are facing today, and that is a huge social problem in our society today. And we will finally be able to see how this is very much so true on how cannabis legalization can be beneficial in the United States by looking at green industry. So first, let us start by looking at a speech Jimmy Carter gave to Congress in 1977. He states, penalties against possession of the drug regarding cannabis should not be more damaging than the drug itself. Now, when we look at mass incarceration, the United States currently holds 25% of the world's prisoners, a common statistic that probably most of you have heard as of yet. And also, the United States cannot collect taxes from imprisoned citizens. No income tax, no property tax, none of those taxes are being collected off of people behind bars. And we can also see that the prison industrial complex earns money from imprisoned people in the United States. This is creating a way for people who are wanting to imprison more people, putting money into private organizations and taking money, potential money, from the United States government. Like I stated before, you cannot collect taxes off people who are behind bars. We will also see how the likelihood of one earning a respectable job position is substantially lowered when incarcerated. And this leads to another problem, unemployment. And the inability to find a respectable job title with a sustainable income has to commonly be supplemented by our country's welfare system. Now that we've talked about mass incarceration, let us now take a look at the war on drugs. We as a country are spending too much money and resources on merely booking and processing cannabis-related offenses. Of the 750,000 drug offenses in 1995, 75% of them were merely for use. This is an old statistic, but it represents how much money and time we've spent using to penalize cannabis-related offenses. 52% of all drug arrests in 2010 were for cannabis-related offenses, according to the ACLU. As of 2012, $1 trillion has been spent on the war on drugs since the Nixon administration had first put it in place. Now, a way for a lot of things that people are concerned about is that people are just going to be growing weed and doing so many things that marijuana would start to become a prominent role in our society, where it would start to overconsume our society once it's legalized. However, this does not mean that government agencies would get their funding taken away. Rather, I would rather suggest that ATF create a cannabis subdivision that would also get funding to combat people who are producing, cultivating, and distributing cannabis outside the regulations that would be put in place. Just as alcohol and just how tobacco and just how firearms are regulated, cannabis can also be regulated the same. Now that we've talked about the war on drugs, let us now take a look at green industry. Colorado sold $1.3 billion in recreational and medical marijuana in 2016. Recreational marijuana accounted for about 2/3 of 2016's haul, ringing in at $875 million in sales compared to medical marijuana's $438 million. Now we can also see that the state took $199 million in taxes and fees too, which is usually put towards law enforcement, building schools, and helping the homeless. Not only that, people who, once cannabis is legalized, just how it was just recently passed in our own state just recently, it still does not take away medical marijuanas and people who have medical marijuana. It doesn't take that privilege away from the people who would be under 21 that still need their medicine. In fact, cannabis patients would be contributing to the improvements of their community and would help ease the intolerance towards cannabis users and recreationally wise and medicinally. Now, hypothetically, if every state were to follow Colorado's lead and were to bring in the same amount of money that Colorado has, give or take the size of the state, just as Colorado is smaller than California and California can make more money than Colorado and make up for the states that are not as big as Colorado, hypothetically, if every single state did as well as Colorado, $6 billion would be collected annually from cannabis sales. Give or take according to population size, just as I just stated. The demand for cannabis will also create more jobs. In 2015, the cannabis industry in Colorado created 18,000 new full-time jobs, and the increased demand for cannabis has created economic stimulation for the state of Colorado because the high demand for cannabis has merited larger warehouses, more lighting and irrigation equipment, and of course staff for the variety of jobs this industry survives on. Not only that, are we contributing to federal, state governments, we're also contributing to local society as well by purchasing all the equipment we need and all the staff that we need, and also helping local government as well. Now, in closing, we will be able to see that today I was arguing on behalf not on just marijuana legalization, but also how the United States can profit off of it. We were able to see this through one, mass incarceration, secondly in the war on drugs, and finally in green industry. The places where we are losing money right now is the United States cannot collect taxes on imprisoned citizens. We're losing money from unemployment when people cannot earn a respectable job. We're also losing money when people are forced to be put on welfare because they cannot sustain themselves after a mistake related to cannabis. And we're also losing money when just booking and processing people offenses related to cannabis. Another way we're losing money is the $1 trillion that we have spent so far since the Nixon administration. However, we're not just losing money, but we can also potentially gain money. Like I stated, Colorado sold $1.3 billion in recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. State took $199 million in taxes, and if we were to follow the lead, we may be able to collect $6 billion annually. And in 2015, Colorado created 18,000 new jobs. Now we can see through all these facets of analyzation that cannabis is a way to create money, not just to have people given another right or another privilege. Thank you.
You get your outline?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, the proposition is not as clear as it needs to be, but the structure of the speech is laid out pretty well. You do have an organization that is identifiable. Although the way the supporting points are stated, they don't really sound like they're inferences. They sound like we're going to analyze this, we're going to analyze this, and I'm going, well, that's an informative speech. That's not an argumentative speech. You want to make the argument that says that the war on drugs has harmed us, that the drug prohibition has resulted in economically damaging mass incarceration. We want those declarative statements so that we know that that's what your argument is, not simply that you're presenting information, but that you're giving us conclusions about that information. The third point I thought was a little bit more inferential in nature, suggesting that there is a business to be developed here, primarily green jobs. When you get to the body of the speech, though, you kind of reverse the war on drugs and the incarceration issue. You start with the incarceration issue, so that was a little bit confusing. There's a lot of assertion about the incarceration issue. There's some statistical information about the number of arrests that there are there, but the information about taxes, how much resources get used, the total impact on the economy, that's all mostly asserted. I think there's probably data that you could find that would support those points. The argument about the war on drugs and how much we've spent on it over the years, that you do have some factual data on, and I thought that you cited that pretty well. There's a lot of information, for instance, that is presented that doesn't have a source citation in it. The closest that I can remember to a specific source being presented was the ACLU gets cited specifically in that first argument. Everything else is based on an experience or an example, typically, for instance, Colorado. And again, I know that the data got reported someplace, and so I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with the information, except that it isn't cited where it comes from. You're just referring to the experience. And it's maybe Colorado's own public records. There's information in the, like on their tax database, for instance, that would get us some of that information. So you should just tell us those kinds of things. You probably are aware that you went overtime a little bit. I like the summary that you had, except that it went on a little too long. It seemed like it was 3 times longer than it needed to be. I think you're trying to recap all of the data that you had in your argument, as well as the points that you were making, and I thought that that was a little bit problematic. The presentation, I think you start off being a little dynamic, using the example of the movie experience, and you kind of walk off to the side to make that point, and then you come back to the center to make the rest of your argument. And it's a little bit more sedate, but not a bad presentation. I think that does help make your argument a little bit more convincing, that you get a little bit more focused there when you're speaking to us. All right, thank you.